guys and interact with you. So this is the first time we've done it. So we're bringing everyone together in April in Miami. We're going to have Steve Miller Band playing in CCR, so if you're a music fan. Stephen Wolfram's going to be there if you like Mathematica. So a lot of external speakers, and my entire company is going to be there. And there's workshops, there's going to be presentations, a keynote that I'm going to do where we'll talk about Cardano's future and potentially new products. And it's just a great opportunity to meet my entire company in one location. Miami's beautiful that time of year. And if you like alligators, you can go to the Everglades. If you got kids, Disney World's there. It's a nice place.
By the way, I have to note one thing. I think this panel here has by far the coolest shoes. Jane was talking about that before we got on. This is quite fascinating. I'm not sure what Tom's got on there, but something
I think Charles Moore's though.
Yeah, but Charles, I wanted to ask you, what are you currently focusing on? I mean, for your presentation this morning, highlighted some of the things, the benefits of what you build. What are some of the focuses you have this year in particular, and what are you doing in different countries around the world? I know you have projects in Ethiopia and Africa. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so we've been in Africa for a while. We have a 52-country strategy, so we'll be in 25 countries by the end of the year, and probably the entire continent by the end of 2020. But basically what we do are PPPs. So we train people, and then we set up public-private infrastructure, and we're trying to modernize most of these governments. We're modernizing blockchain technology. So everything from property and business registration to voting systems to supply chain management across as many verticals as we can find. And once you have blockchain tech, you have digital identities, you have wallets, and then you can link them to permissionless systems like Cardano and Ethereum. Give them then access to credit, insurance, remittances, and these types of things. So it's a slow, methodical march, and it takes quite a bit of time, but it's very meaningful work. You actually get to start from nothing and then eventually build up to something quite significant, and collectively can end up eventually capturing trillions of dollars of value and bringing it into the world economy and bringing it in a very fair, responsible way to the world economy with the principles of our space.
And Tom over here, our friend Tom from New York, he runs a company called FundStrat. They provide a flow of information and study and research that some of the top institutions in the world use and go to him for advisory for it. So Tom, I mean, based on what you've seen and the studies that you've done, especially in the last 2 years, what do you see in the space? How has, I guess, the crypto markets and the information that you've researched, how's the design of new products and new projects coming out changed your view of the space?
Well, I think it's really just reinforcing our view that crypto and digital assets are, it's really sort of replumbing of the financial system in a shift away from centralized entities towards, decentralized trust. So, it's early stages. I think this reminds us a lot of like how wireless developed, or internet, and emerging technologies, but I think the big difference is that, part of this is an education of traditional financial institutions and investors on, value capture is different and where they can find opportunities.
Okay, thank you. Sam, talk to us about Everpedia, and I know you have a number of projects that are happening out there. What are you guys doing right now with the IQ token? How has that helped in the ecosystem that you're building?
Yeah, so I'm the president, co-founder of Everpedia. A lot of you guys probably heard Larry speak today, give the keynote. So we're the decentralized Wikipedia. We're actually one of the largest consumer dApps that's out, and we've just built so much blockchain code, smart contracts as we've expanded the IQ ecosystem. We've acquired talent and increased the size of the company so much that we're basically trying to expand to promising areas in the crypto space. And kind of what everyone here is talking about is we see opportunities that basically we want to expand in the consumer dApp space by building good front ends. First for Everpedia, gaining mass adoption there, as well as new opportunities that we're seeing in terms of institutional adoption of crypto. So one of the main projects I'm also working on right now in the company is called Decentral Bank, which brings DLT technology to currency issuing. The central banks to governments that have expressed interest in issuing currency on the blockchain, their actual national currency. And the reason we're actually working on that is the stuff that we've built at Everpedia, the unique experiences and the software that we've built allow us to actually see these opportunities and execute on building these products probably faster than pretty much anyone else in the space right now. So it's a really exciting time for us as we kind of grow quickly and take some of these markets for ourselves.
And Jane, Dr. Jane here actually is a friend, and I can't really have the right words to introduce her because her resume speaks for herself and for itself. Dr. Jane is basically blockchain social development evangelist. There's many articles, including on Forbes, that you can read about her. But I'm very curious, Dr. Jane, you know, you've successfully built the soda company. You've seen this space grow from its infancy as well. What are you working on in the social development space as it relates to blockchain?
Look, my belief is that blockchain is going to be most transformative in the social impact space, and I think particularly in emerging economies. So where I've been putting my effort is into working with companies that are doing social impact projects in emerging economies, talking to governments and trying to help governments understand why this is so important for them, particularly in relation to service delivery for the poor and for getting the poor and vulnerable into the global economy, and also speaking to international institutions. So I'm working with projects in India, Papua New Guinea, Indonesia and Nigeria, and really trying to help the global community understand how important and transformative these can be if we can get them to scale, and try to get international organisations to lean in and start getting involved in trying to shape this so that you can get that social transformation.
So when you talk about social transformation, Charles, I know you have staffed and you have placed your resources in some of these countries, like you mentioned earlier. How are you transforming the way they think? How are you transforming and designing the economics based on not just the utilization of cryptocurrencies, but the underlying blockchain infrastructure itself?
These economies aren't necessarily blockchain friendly. They're more victims of globalization, where they're being told that they have to change the way that they do business, or they have to change the way they do business out of economic necessity. So Ethiopia, for example, there's carbon reduction, biodiversity requirements, fair trade requirements, and so forth. And whether they like it or not, if they want to sell products on a global marketplace, if they want to actually be competitive in the coffee industry, they're going to have to change the way that they track and trace the beans flowing through the supply chain, the way that they actually practice agriculture, the way they actually plant the trees, maintain the farms. So the government is in the business of looking for good technology to help them achieve these goals. So the key is just being in the right place, being able to be part of that conversation and being able to run pilots and then demonstrate that the kinds of technology that we work on is going to be very beneficial for them. Furthermore, it's all about a conversation of control. One of the biggest problems in emerging economies is they tend to be the battlefield of empires old and current, where these foreign actors come and they kind of take the resources, they take the value, and they don't leave much behind. So it's created a great degree of suspicion when you show up and say, I have this solution that's going to solve all your problems, this cure for all your ills, just trust me and give me all the control and money, and I'll somehow deliver you to the promised land. That was patronizing. A lot of people have died, a lot of problems have occurred from that. So you have to present technology in a way that it can be absorbed from the bottom up and controlled from the bottom up by the locals. So that's part of our strategy. We enter in, we train people, we set up a PPP, we set up an office, the country owns part of it, the locals own part of it, we own part of it, and ultimately the solution is deployed and maintained by local partners and by employees on the ground. So it's a very slow, methodical strategy. It's not very exciting from a day-to-day viewpoint, but over an arc of time you actually can aggregate and build up to something that's quite meaningful. So there is no silver bullet, I'd say, and it just takes patience.
But Dr. Jane, I know that you find this process quite fascinating. You find the methodology to get there quite exciting. So how does that contrast and difference to what Charles has said here in terms of how you guys are building out these processes in these countries? Does it work? Will it work that fast? Will we see this kind of adoption with these emerging frontier technologies this year?
Well, no, I don't think so. I mean, I'd love to say yes, and I'd love to make that prediction and be right, but I don't think so, because and maybe Charles, what I'm seeing is you see a great use case in Niger and a great use case in Indonesia and one somewhere else. But the question that I'm really interested in is, how do you connect that up so that you can have some sort of impact at a reasonable scale? First in one country and then in multiple countries. Because, I mean, I think one of the most powerful use cases for blockchain actually is humanitarian emergencies and the 70 million displaced people who are all around the world disconnected from their identities, not in the financial system, maybe receiving money from UNHCR or OMS or someone like that, which the banks, by the way, are reaping 10% off the top of all of that. And so thinking of ways to be able to give refugees an identity, connect them back with their qualifications and skills. Because one of the most powerful things that I suddenly realised, because we're working with a refugee community in Indonesia, if you're going to pay a people smuggler to take someone from your family to be successful somewhere else, you're going to pick the best, smartest, most educated, likely to succeed person. So in amongst these 70 million people are some amazingly well-qualified and skilled people. And how do we stop looking at them as a problem and see them as a resource that can be deployed in different ways around the world? So I agree with Charles, but I feel an urgency to get people, just stop going, well, that's a really kind of interesting use case and maybe I'll present it at a conference next year, to go, no, let's actually put some effort into seeing how we can take this and have some impact over, a 5 to 7 year period on millions of people.
Yeah, so I totally agree with what Charles was saying. Is a lot of it is just being at the right place and seeing what needs to be done, because there's these problems that can actually be solved with good technology right now, and not a lot of people have both the talent and the capacity to execute on building these solutions. So one of the main reasons we're doing the central bank and actually approaching these government entities to consider issuing digital currency on the blockchain and using DLT technology is we do think it will take too long for all of these things to be completely organically done from the ground up. So one of the approaches that we're taking is we're going directly to the government. We're going directly to the currency issuing entities with the central bank project, and we're saying, if you actually issue digital currency on chain, it'll solve a lot of these problems much more quickly. And I kind of do agree that without actual direct government use of DLT, it'll be a very slow process. It'll have to be an individuated, this community and this use case. But from the government level, if there's actual currency issuance on blockchain technology, that'll actually revolutionize a lot of services at the very top layer.
But we're seeing large institutions do that already. I mean, how many of you guys have heard of the JP Morgan coin? By a show of hands. There we go, quite a few people. Actually, we have nobody better to talk about the JPM coin today with us than the ex-chief equity strategist at JP Morgan. Tom, what are your thoughts about that? I mean, with relation to what Sam was saying, I mean, how are we going to get people to actually use this kind of stuff?
Yeah. Well, I worked at JP Morgan for 15 years. I was disappointed I wasn't part of the pre-sale of the JP Morgan coin. Just kidding. It's a stable currency. I actually, I think on the one hand, JP Morgan coin is a great concept, and it really validates and shows that they really come around on digital currencies. But because it's a stable coin, it almost feels like it's just village money, right? I mean, every bank can issue their own version of the coin, and some won't be even on the blockchain, right? Because I think Sumo shortly after announced their own digital coin, but that's actually not even a blockchain token. So I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's I don't think JP Morgan's goal here is social advancement or change. I think it's really just their chance to put a stamp on blockchain and sort of assert their own agenda. I mean, I think probably very similar to how maybe IBM would have launched their own version of a personal computer just to say they're in the business.
I think that was one of the most validating things to come out in recent months, that this is going to be a thing for banks, and mainly central banks if they quickly adopt it, to actually transfer value and use it as settlement rails. And people building, both the base protocol layer, people at Block 1, people at IOHK, all of these people, they're basically building the next settlement rails for governments to use. Now there's got to be like a group of people that basically approach these governments and build some understanding, right? They're the economists,